Hello. I'm going to be reading from John Keats today. It's kind of an epic poem called Hyperion, a fragment. Deep in the shady sadness of a vale, far sunken from the healthy breath of morn, far from the fiery noon and eve's one star, sat gray-haired Saturn, quiet as a stone, still as the silence round about his lair. Forest on forest hung above his head. Like cloud on cloud, no stir of air was there. Not so much life as on a summer's day robs not one light seed from the feathered grass. But where the dead leaf fell, there did it rest. A stream went voiceless by, still the deadening more, by reason of his fallen divinity. Spreading a shade, the Naiad mid her reeds pressed her cold finger closer to her lips. Along the margin sand large footmarks went, no further than to where his feet had strayed, and slept there since. Upon the sodden ground his old right hand lay nerveless, listless, dead, unsceptered, and his realmless eyes were closed, while his bowed head seemed listening to the earth, his ancient mother, for some comfort yet. It seemed no force could wake him from his place. But there came one with a kindred hand, touched his wide shoulders after bending low, with reverence, though to one who knew it not. She was a goddess of the infant world. By her in stature the tall Amazon had stood a pygmy's height. She would have ta'en Achilles by the hair and bent his neck, or with a finger stayed Ixion's wheel. Her face was large as that of Memphian Sphinx, pedestaled happily in a palace court, when sages looked to Egypt for their lore. But oh, how unlike marble was that face, how beautiful, if sorrow had not made sorrow more beautiful than beauty's self. There was a listening fear in her regard, as if calamity had but begun, as if the vanward clouds of evil days had spent their malice, and the sullen rear was with its stored thunder laboring up. One hand she pressed upon the aching spot, where beats the human heart, as if just there, though immortal, she felt cruel pain. The other upon Saturn's bended neck she laid, and to the level of his ear, leaning with parted lips, some words she spake, and solemn tenor and deep organ tone, some mourning words which in our feeble tongue would come in these like accents. Oh, how frail to that large utterance of the early gods! Saturn, look up! Thou wherefore, poor old king? I have no comfort for thee, no, not one. I cannot say, oh, wherefore deepest sleepest thou? For heaven is parted from thee, and earth thou knows thee not, thus afflicted for a god. And ocean too, with all its solemn noise, has from thy scepter passed, and all the air is emptied of thine hoary majesty. Thy thunder, conscious of a new command, rumbles reluctant o'er our fallen house, and thy sharp lightning in unpracticed hands scorches and burns our once serene domain. Oh, aching time! Oh, moments big as years! All as ye pass, swell out the monstrous truth, and press it so upon our weary griefs, that unbelief has not a space to breathe. Saturn, sleep on. Thoughtless, why did I thus violate thy slumberous solitude? Why should I ope thy melancholy eyes? Saturn, sleep on, while at thy foot I weep. As when upon a trance summer night, those green-robbed senators of mighty woods, tall oaks, branch charmed by the earnest stars, dream, and so dream all night without a stir, save from one gradual solitary gust which comes upon the silence and dies off, as if the ebbing air had but one wave. So came these words and went, the while in tears she touched her fair large forehead to the ground, just where her falling hair might be outspread, a soft and silken mat for Saturn's feet. One moon, with alteration slow, had shed her silver seasons four upon the night, and still these two were postured motionless, like natural sculpture in cathedral cavern, the frozen god still couchant on the earth, and the sad goddess weeping at his feet. Until at length old Saturn lifted up his faded eyes and saw his kingdom gone, and all the gloom and sorrow of the place, that far kneeling goddess, and then spake, as with a palsied tongue, and while his beard shook horrid with such aspen malady. Oh, tender spouse of gold Hyperion, Thea, I feel thee ere I see thy face. Look up, and let me see our doom in it. Look up, and tell me if this feeble shape is Saturn's. Tell me, if thou hear'st thy voice of Saturn, tell me, if this wrinkling brow, naked and bare of its great diadem, peers like the front of Saturn. Who had power to make me desolate? Whence came the strength? How was it nurtured to such bursting forth? While fate seems strangled in my nervous gasp. But it is so, and I am smothered up, and buried from all godlike exercise of influence benign on planets pale, of admonition of to the winds and seas, of peaceful sway above man's harvesting, and all those acts which Deity supreme doth ease its heart of lovin'. I am gone, away from my own bosom. I have left my strong identity, my real self, somewhere beyond the throne, and where I sit, here on this spot of earth, search thee a search. Open thine eyes a-turn, and sphere them round upon all space, space starred, the lorn of light, space regioned with life air, and barren void, spaces of fire, and all the yawn of hell. Search thee a search, and tell me if thou seest a certain shape or shadow making way with wings or chariot fierce to repossess a heaven he lost erewhile. It must be of right progress. Saturn must be king. Yes, there must be a golden victory. There must be gods thrown down and trumpets blown, of triumph calm and hymns of festival upon the gold clouds metropolitan, voices of soft proclaim and silver stir, of strings in hollow shells, and there must be beautiful things made new for the surprise of the sea children. I will give command. Thea, 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 where is Saturn? This passion lifted him upon his feet and made his hands to struggle in the air, his druid locks to shake and ooze with sweat, his eyes to fever out, his voice to cease. He stood and heard not Thea's sobbing deep. A little time, and then he snatched utterance thus. But cannot I create? Cannot I form? Cannot I fashion forth another world, another universe, to overbear and crumble this to naught? Where is another chaos? Where? That word found way unto Olympus and made quake the rebel three. Thea was startled up, and in her bearing was a sort of hope, as thus she quick voice spake, yet full of awe. This cheers our fallen house. Come to our friends. Oh, Saturn, come away and give them heart. I know the convert, for thence came I hither. Thus brief, then with beseeching eyes she went, with backward footing, through the shade of space. He followed, and she turned to lead the way, though age bows that yielded like the mist, which eagles cleave up mounting from their nest. Meanwhile, in other realms, big tears were shed, more sorrow like to this, and such like woe too huge for mortal tongue or pen of scribe. The Titans fierce, self-hid or prison bound, groaned for the old allegiance once more, and listened in sharp pain for Saturn's voice. But one of the whole mammoth brood still kept his sovereignty and rule and majesty. Blazing Hyperion on his orbed fire still sat, still snuffed the incense, teeming up from man to the sun's gods, yet unsecure. For as among us mortal omens drear, fright and perplex, so also shuddered he, not at dog's howl, or gloom bird's hated screech, or the familiar visiting of one upon the first toll of his passing bell, or prophesyings of a midnight lamp, but horrors portioned to a giant nerve. Oft made Hyperion ache, his palace bright, bastioned with pyramids of glowing gold, and touched with shade of bronzed obelisks, glared a blood red through all its 1,000 courts, arches and domes and fiery galleries, and all its curtains of auroran clouds. Flushed angrily, while sometimes eagles' wings, unseen before by gods or wondering men, darkened the place, and neighing steeds were heard, not heard before by gods or wondering men. Also, when he would taste the spicy wreaths of incense breathed aloft by sacred hills, instead of sweets his ample palate took savor of poisonous brass and metal sick. And so, when harbored in the sleepy west, after the full completion of a fair day, for rest divine upon exalted couch, and slumber in the arms of melody, he paced away the pleasant hours of ease, with stride colossal on from hall to hall, while fair within each aisle and deep recess, his winged minions in close clusters stood, amazed and full of fear, like anxious men who on wide plains gather in panting troops, when earthquakes jar their battlements and towers. Even now, while Saturn, roused from icy trance, went step for step with Thea through the woods, Hyperion, leaving twilight in the rear, came slope upon the threshold of the west. Then, as was wont, his palace door flew ope in smoothest silence, save what solemn tubes blown